Hello, this is Go Against IPPTV. We have a special guest in America. We are together with Pastor Paweł Chojecki and CEO of the John Birch Society, the best anti-communist society in the world. Mr. Art Thompson, it's a privilege to have you here in our television for the second time.
Oh, it's my pleasure, really.
And we are just after the 60th anniversary of the John Birch Society. And that's incredible for us because we've heard from you that you've been facing a lot of critics and problems and, even infiltration in your society. And it's very encouraging for us that we are not alone in the same problems, and you survived such a big amount of time, 60 years. And could you tell us something? What is the phenomenon? How could you explain the phenomenon of the John Birch Society?
The what?
The phenomenon?
The secret.
The secret?
Yeah.
Secret of success.
Oh, the secret of success. Well, it's multifaceted. There are many different things that enter into it. Number one is the will to do it. Number two is the enthusiasm of our members. That there are other things as well. We stick to the point. We have a set agenda and we don't deviate. We keep our eye on the ball, in other words. We're single-minded. And the way we are structured has kept us going for a long time too. We are organized in such a way it's so difficult to destroy us. And they've never, the communists and the internationalists have never come up against an organization like that before. So that's a very brief answer to your question.
And could you tell us more about your story with the John Birch Society?
Well, it's not that interesting. Well, I was raised an anti-communist by my father. When I was 10, 11 years old, my father made me read the life history of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. He had me read the Constitution and the Declaration and understand it. He had me even read George Orwell's 1984, the novel.
Yeah.
It's not a good book for a 10 or 11-year-old to read because there's some things in there that are a little bit beyond what they should read, but I understood it. I got the gist of it, so to speak. So I grew up an anti-communist, and in Seattle, where I was, we had a lot of communism in Seattle. I mean, it was not unusual for communists to be selling the Worker out on the street, their official organ, their newspaper. And so I saw it everywhere I went. Then I went through school and I realized that my teachers weren't quite teaching me the things that were correct about the civic aspect, the government of the United States, the form of government we had, and that sort of thing. I don't know if it was out of ignorance or by design. It's hard to say. But then when I kind of went through a period of college and that sort of thing, and then in uniform, where I was not that interested in government and so forth. But as soon as I got out of active duty, came home, I could see an attack against this organization called the John Birch Society. But I could still see this foment within the community by the communists. And so I started to infiltrate Marxist organizations because I'd read various books by ex-FBI agents and that sort of thing that had infiltrated them and exposed them and therefore had defeated them. And I thought, that's the only way you do this. I was mistaken, but I learned a lot in the process. And I worked in tandem with the police department's intelligence squad. And we would trade information and back and forth and all of that. However, when I read more about this, what the John Birch Society was saying, and they were actually attacking the John Birch Society for saying these things, I would say to myself, well, wait a minute, this is true. I know this to be true, what the John Birch Society is saying. One day a guy did this to my front door, and he wanted me to sign a petition for Barry Goldwater to run for president. So I signed it, got interested in it, and I found out there was a draft Barry Goldwater for president. So I started to work with that committee. One day, that gentleman came by and he says, "I've got a book I want you to read." And that book was The Politician. And I started to read it. And I said, whoa, these are things I didn't know about people in my own government. I thought my government was anti-communist, but certain people in the government were not, that they were helping the communists. So when he came over to my house one day, a few days after he gave me the book, and coincidentally, I was sitting on my couch reading the book when he knocked on the door. He says, "Have you started reading the book?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Well, what do you think?" I says, "It's fantastic. Information I had no idea of, completely documented." And so I looked him in the eye and I said, "Are you a member of the John Birch Society?" He says, "What do you want to know for?" Well, in those days, a lot of people were skittish because of the attack against the Birch Society. I said, "I want to join." So I joined the John Birch Society and then became a very active person, became a volunteer leader, served in every volunteer position there was. They finally asked me to do a special project for the society, which I worked on. They asked me to come on the staff of the society, which I did, and remained on the staff for quite some time. Then after about 12 or 13 years, I quit and formed my own company, actually two companies. And then when I reached an age of in the middle 90s, 1990s, I said, I've got to get back full-time into the fight. So I sold my companies and asked them if they wanted me back. They said, yes, we do. And so I went back on the staff of the society and never looked back. I just kept giving more and more responsibility until finally one day I was elected by the board of directors as CEO to run it. So that's it in a nutshell. Only took me, what, 7 minutes?
But how many years?
Amazing story.
During the convention, you said that the main goal of globalists are to establish the global government.
Yes, one world government.
And to destroy Christianity.
Yeah, to eliminate God.
Yes, to eliminate God.
Yeah, out of everything.
Yes, and especially the second goal is familiar with my area of interest, and I would like to ask you what method they use to do the second goal, and what do you like to say Polish pastors, priests, Christian, how to rescue from this threat?
Well, first of all, the way they've done that in the United States is to deprive the American people of certain basic fundamental principles of what we call Americanism. The first fundamental issue is in the Declaration of Independence, where it says to the people that our rights come from God. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Our rights come from God. They don't come from anywhere else. The government doesn't give them to us or anything. It's God gives them to us. And that fundamental right has been negated within the public school instruction over the years, to where most people don't know that today. And that was the beginning of taking God out of the equation. And just slowly but surely, they planted the idea that it was unfair to promote the Bible and Christianity and God in the schools. For instance, one organization that was begun back in the 1830s in this country is called Skull and Bones. That's really the name of the organization. The co-founder of Skull and Bones lost a race for governor of the state of Ohio back before the Civil War because he wanted to take the Bible out of the schools, you see. And so the first thing was, we're going to maybe change the Bible a little bit. We want to get it out of the schools because after all, that's imposing a religion upon the kids and so on and so forth. They finally got the Bible out of the schools. And slowly but surely they started to take it away from everywhere else. We have buildings and institutions all over this country, for instance, that have scripture above the lintel, you know, that says, "In God we trust," and that sort of thing, or even the Ten Commandments. Well, those things are beginning to disappear, although there's a movement now in our country to bring them back. And in some states, it's already been a success, where they've said that every school in our state has to have a prominent sign in the school that we are one nation under God, that kind of thing.
And let's come back to the 60th anniversary of the John Birch Society. What are your dreams about the future of the John Birch Society and about the United States of America?
Well, first of all, let me tell you our dream for the United States, and that is simply to get back to the Constitution. It's the oldest Constitution of any government in the world. And that Constitution was formulated not to delineate the government, but to limit the government. In other words, these are the rights of the people, and we are establishing a government to protect those rights and the independence of the American people, and we give you the permission to do these very specific things, but nothing else. In other words, you can only do this, you can only grow so big, and the rest of it is up to the people, freedom. As long as an individual or a business or institution is allowed to do anything they want, as long as they don't violate the right of the other individual and the other institution and the other property and that sort of thing. That's freedom. And we were a moral people. I mean, everything we did in the United States was based on our religion primarily. It was carried into business as well as our personal and family lives. It was carried into government, and people understood that. They don't understand that today because of this attack on God and everything else. So what we want to do is to get the government back to the constitutional level. If we had that, our government would only be 20% of the size it is today. Another thing that we want is that the government of the United States mind its own business. We are not the world's policemen. We may be friendly with people and allied with them and that, but we cannot, go to war with everybody in the world. That is one of the concepts of the conspiracy we fight. They did it back in the 1830s and 40s and 50s, the idea that we're going to conquer the rest of the world in the name of democracy, to make this one world government. And then it kind of phased out because of our Civil War. But as far as the society is concerned, what we have in the future is just keeping on. In other words, the principles upon which we were established, the organizational aspects of how we were established, we're just going to keep doing those things and further the knowledge level of the American people. See, the basic problem we have is ignorance. You can't solve any problem if people are ignorant. And so our precept is that we are going to go educate people with action programs and such about what the basic principles are and what they can do to solve them. A lot of people have these various solutions like term limits. If we just have term limits for politicians, well, we have term limits. They're called elections. Every election somebody has to stand up and run again and be elected. And the people should have the right to vote for whomever they wish as a result. Term limits will take good people out of government as well as bad people out of government. Let me give you an example. I'm basically for term limits in the philosophical sense, but I know they don't work. In the state where I was, they had term limits. They finally got rid of them because they found they didn't work. But Mexico, for instance, has term limits in their national legislature. And look at Mexico. It's not helped them. They're a very corrupt country. So basically, our whole program is based on getting that knowledge out there so that people will be able to make their own decisions knowing the right information at hand. And it's been deprived them in our school systems for a long, long time. And it was even a problem when I went to school. After I got out of school, I remembered other things that I was taught that I know now were not true, you know. And sometimes you couldn't blame the teachers. They didn't know any better either. They'd been deprived of them in the teachers' colleges and so on and so forth. But our whole thing is based on education with the truth. We've never ever been able, no one's ever found the John Birch Society to ever say anything that didn't turn out to be true. Nothing.
You are familiar with Polish history. You mentioned during anniversary about the Battle of Vienna when Polish army, King Jan Sobieski saved the Europe. How it was how it's happened that you are so familiar with Polish history?
Well, yeah, it's funny you ask that, because I wasn't familiar with it. And then you invited me over last year.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, you know, I really don't know much about Poland. So I got some information and started to look at it and realized, whoa, these are things I had no idea of, the glorious history of Poland. You see, because there's been an underground campaign, if you would, in the United States to demean Poles in Poland. You had Polish jokes, you know, that they were the stupid people and that sort of thing. And so, you know, and I think it was because of the wonderful history that you do have and the potential your country has to be a real leader in Europe and a light to the world that this has happened. So anyway, that's how I found out. Yeah, didn't learn it in school.
Yeah, and maybe the last one question. My father gave the lecture during the 60th anniversary of the John Birch Society, and what are your impressions after this lecture?
Well, I only heard one of them because I was in a board meeting, but let me answer it this way. My impression is what I got from the attendees there, what they were talking about his talk. And it wasn't just his talk, it was his personality and demeanor. They really liked his talks, but all of you folks that have been here, all I hear constantly, what wonderful people. And that's really it. They realize that you speak the truth. They like people who speak the truth. And that you have no animosity, really. You know, you're doing it out of love. You're an enemy of communism because you love freedom.
Amen.
That kind of thing, you see. So that's what they appreciate.
Mm-hmm. And maybe one more. Why do you love freedom?
Why do I love freedom? Because I'm a cantankerous guy that wants to do what I want to do. I don't want people telling me, oh, you can't do that, you know. I've been that way all my life. I was not a very good student to these poor teachers that had me in their room. So, but really, freedom is really of God, you know. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand, that every time you don't have freedom, the root is against God. The people that impose these things are against God. God wants us to be free within bounds, but it's a freedom, and those bounds come from within. You know, that I am self-disciplined. I said I have a set of morals, I have a set of rules for myself. I abide by those things. I honor my neighbor. I honor the community. I honor my wife, whatever it happens to be, and that's the way I want it. I want to discipline myself. I don't want somebody else disciplining me.
That was Mr. Art Thompson, CEO of the John Birch Society. It was a great thing to be here with you, because we didn't know many people from John Birch Society. We knew Mr. Dan Saxon from Illinois and Mr. R. Thompson, because we invited you to Poland. And now when we are here and we get to know these people, we have the same impressions like you have from Poland and Go Against the Tide people. So we are very thankful for your hospitality and for everything.
Well, you know, people of God get along no matter where they come from, right?
Amen.
Yeah.
And as you know, our friends from Poland would like us to come with hope. And thank you for giving us this hope in a big amount. Thank you.
Yeah, our pleasure, really. Thank you.
So this was a special program from America to Go Against the Tide TV. Thank you so much, and we will be in touch, and we hope to come to Poland safely. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.